Hey everyone, good morning, good afternoon, depending on where you are actually living or streaming from. Um, hey Panthers, first of all, welcome to HillmanTok University, week one of professional sewing for beginners with learning differences. It's a bag making course 101. Let me just make sure my volume is up. There we go. I'm your instructor, Nina Dia Stevens. I'm going to be with you for the next 10 weeks and just a little, I'm going to give you an overview today of the course. We're not going to be doing any particular physical thing today. We're just going to review the course so you know what the expectations of the course is and what I'm expecting. Um, just to give you a little bit of like background on you me, of course. I am a instructor who has taught in college and high school fashion design environments. I've taught design and sample making, everything that has to do with putting a garment together for 12 years in a college, Moore College of Art and Design, and then I went to develop a high school curriculum for fashion design for high school students for 5 years and taught that. And I currently am a full-time entrepreneur, still freelancing, doing things for in retail, but to a larger scale. My brand is Rural Fulani Living. It's home goods and fashion, of course, inspired by my life as a Senegalese. I'm originally from West Africa and, of course, an American, and I'm American as well. Um, just to give you an overview on why a sewing class for students with learning differences. So I am diagnosed ADHD, recently diagnosed. I would say I am in my early 50s and struggled with learning for a long period of time, worked better with more tactile visual learning. So I thought it was so important to gear a sewing class or gear a fashion class, pattern making class, eventually all of those things to come towards students with learning differences. One, because I feel like it is a community of individuals who are a lot of times in the arts and in design who are struggling at times. Even though we look at design and the arts as being for creatives, there are also creatives who have learning differences, and there are times when there's things that we are being taught and we don't necessarily get it right away like everyone else. I know my biggest struggle is measuring, math, things of that nature. Also, when someone is communicating something to me, I may need to see it visually a few times before I actually get it. Working with task, keeping things on task, of course, being diagnosed with ADHD is like being more task oriented. Those are things that I struggle with as well. Staying organized, not getting distracted, things of that nature. But I'm extremely creative. But with ADHD, it is a struggle to kind of like pull everything together and to get focused on one thing at a time. So what I really like to do as a designer and a creative with learning differences is I like to modify the things that I've been taught over the years, whether it was in design school or whether it was working in the industry. And I like to modify them. I created my own ways to modify them so that I understood and so that I was able to learn. And so I felt it was important to speak to that community of creatives with learning differences, especially when it's geared towards sewing. um, I was fortunate enough to work in a high school environment where a big percentage of my students had learning differences. So I had to find ways to teach them how to sew or how to measure or how to cut um, in a different way. And those are the ways that I taught myself and ways that I created, and I just extended them to my students. So I felt it was important to not just have a basic sewing class, but to have a basic sewing class for those of us with learning differences. And it's not necessarily something that we do where we slow things down. They're just taught in a different way. And there are extra things that we add on or additional things that we add on to make things more simplified and clearer as far as those of us with learning differences. So once again, some of you probably already looked at the syllabus. If you went to the HillmanTok University website and you're enrolled, if you're just kind of like peeking in today just to kind of get an overview of what the class is, absolutely go to the HillmanTok University website, look at the syllabus, see what you'll be learning over the next 2 weeks. And I'm actually going to go over those things today because I feel like things need to be broken down a little bit. Sometimes we see things in writing, and I know for me, as someone with learning differences, I wasn't the one that always raised my hand if I had a question because I felt like my peers already kind of understood it. So I didn't want to stick out like a sore thumb and be like, what exactly is this or what exactly is that? Because sometimes, as even an educator, we sometimes assume that our students know something that they don't necessarily know. Or that generally everybody should know what this particular thing is or how this is done. And then you have the fear of like actually raising your hand and being the one who is like kind of like the person who's like outside of the framework of what everyone else knows. So I want to appeal to those individuals and let you know that, of course, absolutely, positively, things will be slowed down a little bit, but they're going to be more modified specifically for those of us with learning differences. So if you don't have the syllabus already, please, please, please email me. I am Fulani Beauty at gmail.com. That's I am Fulani Beauty at gmail.com. And I will drop that into the description. In your description for today's class is specifically what is on the syllabus. So you can see right in the description if you don't have the syllabus or you can't get access to the syllabus, it is in today's description. I'm also going to go back in today's description and drop a few other things in the description as well, so that way you all have a sense of what's expected. So today, if you're looking at the syllabus, and some of you have it, some of you don't, we're going to review it. We're going to talk about each week, generally what we're going to do for each week. It's 10 weeks. On the syllabus are each of the specific dates. So right at the top of the syllabus, you'll be able to see the specific dates for each class. Some weeks we will skip a week and we will meet on Wednesdays at 11 a.m. And it may not be like, for instance, we're meeting today. I don't think we're meeting again until June 11th, and that's only because I have scheduling conflict, but it would always be on a Wednesday and it will be at 11 a.m. So today we're just going to review the syllabus. I'm going to field questions. I'm going to kind of look at the website as I'm talking. I'm trying to like look and see exactly what the questions are. This is kind of new to me, and I have done lives before. Earlier on when I first started the YouTube channel, I felt like, I just wanted to kind of dive into lives a little bit because I think there's very few live sewing classes where you specifically get to see the person's hands physically doing that particular thing. I think there's tons of great basic sewing classes, but I feel like there is less classes that actually physically show the hands doing it. I think there's times when people are teaching basic sewing and they give you instruction and then they kind of hold up this like finished product or this thing that they're actually sewing instead of physically showing you exactly what you're going to be doing. There's less of that, and my class is more of that. So when I'm sewing something, you will physically see the sample going into the machine. You will physically see my hands cutting. You will physically see me measuring. Because I feel like visually, for those of us with learning differences, a lot of us are visual learners, and especially when it comes to the arts, we are visual learners. And sometimes we need to see things over and over again to get it. So the great thing about the live is the live will be, of course, available to you. And as you can see, those of you who kind of review our YouTube channel, the Royal Fulani Living Sew School channel, you see there are almost 50 videos for basic sewers with learning differences. So as you can see, like some of them are slowed down. There are some videos that are longer than others, depending on what the actual context of the video is. So some things like we have a zipper demonstration, which is a little bit longer in 2 parts. We have some things like, sewing a plain seam. That's a little bit simpler. So you'll always have something to go back to refer to in addition to the live that I would do every Wednesday, or the Wednesdays that we're scheduled to do that. So going over the syllabus a little bit more. And I'm going to field your questions at the kind of like in between and a little bit more at the end of the class, because I feel like I want to give you my undivided attention when I'm answering the questions. I don't want to look and then kind of like go back and look at the questions and look. I want to make sure I'm answering your questions and making sure I'm fielding the questions and you're getting the answers clearly and in the way that you will understand. So as far as the syllabus for this week, of course, we're reviewing it. Let's talk a little bit about where we'll be each week. So each week we will be here on the Rural Fulani Living YouTube channel. Of course, once again, your syllabus from the HillmanTok University website is specifically dated for those specific Wednesdays that we will be here. Under each date, it will tell you exactly what we are doing. Now, if you miss a class, you have the live to go back to refer to. You also have, of course, our YouTube tutorials to go back and refer to. But this class is specifically bag making 101. So we will be taking this each week. We'll have a different step for coming out with the finished product of a bag. Okay, so each week I will tell you these are the supplies that you need for the upcoming class. This is what the expectations for you that you need to be fulfilled for the next class. So it's so important that if you're going to do this, you want to be able to follow the steps as we're doing them. And of course, you can go back and always refer to the live to make sure that you fully understand, or if there's something you don't understand, you can always go back to the live and look at the live. So we will be here at the Rural Fulani Living So School channel on the assigned Wednesdays, which are on the syllabus. And then of course you guys know I have uploaded on the syllabus the actual link for the Rural Fulani Living So School, and we're really easy to find. The first class session, of course, we will have be going over generally what the expectations of the class will be. Let's see, I'm looking at it so I can stay on point. So let's talk a little bit about the objective for today. So, of course, you guys, I introduced myself, you know who I am. And if you have questions about, the fashion industry, things of that nature, I am 3 decades into the fashion industry, went to design school, have worked in the industry in New York, have worked in the industry overseas. Once again, taught for 12 years in fashion education at a collegiate and high school level. So if you have questions about schools, your path as a designer, you can absolutely send me those questions as well. I'm here to assist you. Let's look at the skills you're going to learn. Okay, so today we're just going to go over the class expectations and your assignments for each week. Then we're going to go over your supply list and your resources that you'll need. That's super important. And what I want to do is I want to break down the supply list week by week by week, because I feel like sometimes I know buying all your supplies outright in one sitting sometimes doesn't always work for everyone financially. So I want to make sure I give you a series of different resources where you can buy your supplies, where they can be more affordable. Today I'm going to show you a few resources. I'm going to have my computer here. I'm going to actually visually show you on my computer when I purchase supplies, where I purchase them from. If you are someone who doesn't shop on Amazon, I understand, I get it. That is one of our resources, but there are other resources as well, because I understand everybody has their preference. We're going to talk about the best sewing machine for a beginner, because I feel like that is key. Like, you as a beginner sewer, and especially a beginner sewer with learning differences, you need a machine that is going to be the best machine for you. And a lot of individuals can recommend a machine that they absolutely love, but is that the best beginner sewing machine? So at this stage of the game, having been, in design and fashion for 3 decades, I have a series of machines. I have like home sewing machines. I had an industrial machine that I just donated. I have a variety of different machines. You will eventually step up your machine game as you go along, as you get to sew more, as you become more of, some of you are sewing to sell, what we call sewing to sell. Some of you just want to learn how to sew, but some of you are taking this class because you want to sew to sell. And what that means is basically you want to create products that are so good that they rival those of retail. So the way that this class is taught based upon industry standards. I'm only teaching you based upon industry standards. What does that mean? That means that I'm teaching you based upon how it is made in the fashion industry. So I'm not teaching you from a home sewing perspective. I'm teaching you from the perspective of how I was taught in design school, which is based off from industry standards, and how things are conducted in the industry. So if you're sewing to sell, this is definitely a basic beginning class for you. That's why it says professional sewing. And there's nothing wrong with home sewing. Don't get me wrong, but I think in order to go to the next level, and if you're interested in being a little bit more gearing your things towards retail or selling or entrepreneurship or selling in stores or trade shows, vending, all of those things, you want the quality of your product to be at a professional standard. You want to know how things are done, executed based upon industry standards. I want you to be able to have a product at the end of this 10 weeks that rivals a product that you see in the store. So we will get the labels for your product. Every single step that I will teach you will be based upon industry standards. So this is definitely the class, the beginner class, for those of you with learning differences who want to sew to sell. Okay, so that's super important that I say that. I want you to understand your resources for fabrics, because we all know Joann Fabrics went out of business. That is a tragedy for a lot of us. I didn't necessarily shop at Joann Fabrics any longer because I had other resources where I would get fabric, patterns, supplies that I felt like were more affordable and more convenient for my lifestyle. So ordering something and have it come in, that's more convenient for my lifestyle. Even though I could order from Joann's was a little bit more limited for me as far as like getting supplies that were supplies that I used working in the fashion industry. So I'm going to give you resources today that are going to help you find what you need outside of us losing, unfortunately, Joann Fabrics. Let's see. So also understanding your resources for sewing patterns, because I think Joann's was probably one of the biggest resources for sewing patterns, where you could go in, you could physically see the pattern, look at the images, find what you needed. And some people like that. Some people like going into a retail place and actually finding their patterns and going through the pattern book, looking for patterns. I'm going to give you a few resources that's going to allow you to find patterns that you may want to use. And the first resource that I'm going to give you today, and that's the resource that we're using for the next 10 weeks, actually this pattern is absolutely free. And it's a PDF pattern, because I feel like that's kind of the direction we're going in a little bit more, where if you purchase a PDF pattern, you're downloading it on your computer and you're printing it out, right away. So it's not like you have to wait for it to come in the mail or you have to go out and find it. It's going to be available to you right away, where you're going to be able to download it, print it out, put it together, and basically have it right away. So the pattern that we're using in this 10-week course to make our first bag is actually going to be a PDF pattern. And if you don't have a printer at home, you can always print it out at, a local shop, Kinko's, Staples, though they all do it. So, and if you don't have that available to you, please email me, because I absolutely will pop it in an envelope, send it out to you if I can get your address, and I will put that, of course, in the description as well. So if you don't have a resource where you can print things out, print your patterns out, please let me know that. I want to be as much assistance as I possibly can be. I do not have a problem putting, a PDF pattern in an envelope and sending it out to a student. I want you to have the things that you need. And because that pattern is free, I'm more than happy to do that. So as far as today, you don't really need any supplies for today. We're just kind of going over everything. I feel like jumping right in today is sewing, that's a little aggressive. So I want you guys to know what you're dealing with for the next few weeks. As far as direct instruction, okay, so That's what I'm giving you each week. That's the direct instruction I'm giving you each week. For this week, we're just going to, we're reviewing the syllabus, of course. Um, we're going to discuss your supplies. I'm going to show you the supplies that you need for next week. So each week, when we meet, I will say, these are the supplies you need for next week, and I will visually have that supply to show you. Once again, because I'm an individual, I have a learning difference. I need to visually see something. If someone says, well, I need you to get a magnetic pincushion, I'm probably going to go on and Google and see what it looks like so I know I'm getting the right thing. So each week when I give you the supplies for the following week, I will absolutely show you that supply. I will hold it up, show it to you so you can visually see it, so you know exactly what to expect, and you can always go back to the live and say, okay, what did Mina, what's the see-through ruler? I don't remember what that is. Let me go back and look at the live and see exactly what that physically looks like. So I will show you each supply physically each week, and I will prep you for each week. So I'll say, okay, next week we're going to do X, Y, and Z. These are the supplies that you need, and I will physically show you those supplies so you know exactly what it looks like. As far as office hours, let's talk a little bit about that. After each class, by the end of the week, I'm even going to say by midweek, since our class is on Wednesday, I will upload my office hours for that week. Now, what does that entail? Office hours can entail your questions being answered. I also I'm looking into actually creating office hours through maybe like a Google Meet or something like that, where I can physically see what you're doing so I can answer your questions specifically. So since we are all over, I know I have students from all over the world, and I know with Royal Fulani Living So School, like when I look at the list of subscribers, they're from everywhere. I want to be able to give my Panthers from HillmanTok University a little bit of a step up as far as like what I'm able to give you as an instructor. So if you are one student who's like, Mina, I really need to see, I really need you to see what I'm sewing, or I really need you to see and ask, I want to ask if this is correct. I absolutely am open during those office hours. I can say, okay, do you need me to visually look at it? Or do you have a question that I can answer via, the live? So yes, I will post when my office hours are on TikTok. I will post when my office hours are on Instagram. I will post them on Facebook. And of course, I will post them on the YouTube channel. So you have access to all of those resources to know when my office hours are. Then I will give you my email, and you will email me and say, okay, I need some office hours, but I need you to visually see what I'm working with. So that way I can help you, and I can look at what you're showing me and say, okay, your seam is not straight, seam, rip that out, and then try to do that again. Or give you direction. If there's something that you're struggling with, I can give you direction. I can kind of like visually show you on my end, and then you can replicate on your end. So I want to be able to offer that special thing that I don't normally offer except for when I'm teaching in class to my HillmanTok University students, to my Panthers. So my office hours, once again, will be posted. Our classes meet on Wednesdays. After we meet on Wednesdays, my office hours probably posted the next day. It'll be 24 hours later, so you'll know when my office hours are. And of course, once again, they'll be posted on all social media platforms. I'll tell you the date and the time. I'll also put my email in it as well. And you can email me and say, Mina, I need you to visually look at something. So, okay, homework. For those of us who are like, I mentioned earlier, I'm in my 50s. That's the word probably like homework. So homework, this is super important. Okay. So if your goal is to learn how to professionally sew to the point where you're selling, I would encourage you to stick with the class each week so that you don't feel like you're so behind. But at the same time, I do understand everybody's responsibilities in life are different. Everybody's lives are different in general, and you may get busy and you may miss a class. That class, once again, will be up for you to see. The live will be up for you to see. So it's super important that you stay step by step with the class when I have lives and I'm teaching. But at the same time, I get it. Some things happen. If you have to visually go back and look at the class, I'm all for it. Once again, if you need me to help you during office hours, I will be available to do that. But I do understand sometimes if you miss a class. Once again, on the syllabus, the classes are the date for the classes are on the syllabus, so you'll know. And then for homework, I will always have the link on your syllabus. I will always have the link for these are the things that we did this week. And here's a few of the videos that can help you. And those videos are all, of course, from the Royal Fulani Living So School channel. And then, of course, you will have the live available to be able to see exactly what I did. But if you need another resource as far as like a visual resource, I will have other videos that align with what we're doing as far as like the bag making class to be able to assist you. Okay, so this week we're just generally going over the class. Next week, and I'm going to go week to week, our next class session will be June 11th, and that, of course, is on the syllabus. You will see that. We'll be mastering your sewing machine, understanding your machine, seam guide, and executing a plain seam. Okay, this is where we get into it a little bit. All right, what do I recommend as far as a beginner sewing machine? Because I have taught for so long, and I've taught collegiate once again and high school, I would say Singer is the best model, and it's the Singer heavy duty series. And I do have a video that I posted from the channel that gives you a step-by-step review of each machine. I've worked with a lot of machines, but as far as the machine that is the best for beginner sewers is the Singer heavy duty series. So I would say 4411 or 4423, and I will go back and double check that and make sure that is in fact the machine that is the one that's going to be recommended, and I will put that in the description. So I'm going to show you. I have mine here. Okay. So this is the Singer machine, and I'm going to hold it up so you can see it. Okay. This is part of the heavy duty series. So the Singer heavy duty series, I want to say, has about maybe like 5 or 6 different machines, but there are ones that are better for beginner sewers. Some of the Singer heavy duty machines are a little bit more complex. They're digital. There's a lot of different things going on. As a beginner sewer, I want to simplify things as best as possible for you. So I always recommend 4423 or 4411. And I'll go back and kind of like drop that in the description. But the reason why I recommend this machine and the Singer heavy duty series, 1, because it's beginner friendly, 2, because I've had the least amount of like mechanical issues with these machines. Beginner sewers have a tendency to be a little bit hard on machines, and that these are the machines that I feel like stand up to the test of time when you're working with beginner sewers. So for instance, when I taught high school, I had to, set up a studio for like, let's say 27 students. And these were the machines that I set up the studio with, and they were the machines, I think maybe I had 1 or 2 that needed to be repaired at the end of the school year. But I absolutely positively recommend the Singer heavy duty series. Looks like this. It's gray, very simple body. And this is the machine that we'll be using for the next 10 weeks. If you have questions about purchasing, price points, things of that nature, yes, you can get these machines used, but I would say if you're going to get a used machine, get it from a reputable supplier. Like, I wouldn't get it off Craigslist or get it off of, Facebook Marketplace, because you don't know what damage the machine has. You don't know what whether the machine has been repaired or how it's been upkept. So I would definitely recommend, if you're going to get a used machine, get a used machine from a reputable supplier. So we're working with the Singer heavy duty series. We're either going to use 4423 or 4411, and the series has different numbers. So those are the 2 machine numbers that I recommend. As far as, and once again, if you need more of an overview of why that machine is geared towards beginners, or why my professional opinion is that they are geared towards beginners, absolutely positively on the syllabus, there is a link. You can click on that link. That link takes you to the video where I break everything down. Because it's super important as a beginner sewer that you don't get overwhelmed by all the bells and whistles that machines sometimes have a tendency to have. It's so important. So I don't want anyone to become overwhelmed with their machine, so overwhelmed with understanding how the machine works, and then get slowing down the process of your project. It's super important that you have a simplified machine that's quick for you to understand. And then eventually, as you advance, you could have 2 machines, 3 machines, and those machines kind of like level up as you go on as a beginner sewer. Um, so next week we'll be using our machine. I'll be the live that I will do. We will be going into understanding your machine and the scene guide and executing a plane scene. So that's next week. What is a plane scene? A plane scene is basically anything that you sew and put together. Is when you put those 2 pieces of fabric together and you sew straight. That's what a plane scene is. And I explain that in that way because as someone with learning differences, sometimes when things were explained to me in design school or in the industry, it was wordy. It was like this, overcomplication of explaining something. So what a plane seam is when we take the 2 pieces of fabric, put them together, and sew straight. So we're going to do that next week, and we're just going to work on that because that is the core of everything you're going to make. You have to know how to sew straight, and it's important that you master that first before you actually segue into making a product or a garment. Because if you don't know how to sew straight or put 2 pieces of fabric together, raw edge to raw edge, and sew a straight seam, it's going to be difficult for you to make something of a good quality. And I want you to have something that's going to be a good quality. Once again, next week we'll be here. Each week will be the Royal Fulani Living Sew School channel. It's just a way for me to kind of like get into a rhythm and get you in the same place each week. Next week, the following week, which will be 6/25, that will be our next class, June 25th. They're all on Wednesdays. You will be understanding and executing seam allowance. So what is seam allowance? Seam allowance is basically the increment of fabric that you sew in order to make a garment. So some seam allowance is 1/4 of an inch. Some seam allowance is 1/2 an inch. Some seam allowance is 1 inch. So we will go over what is seam allowance and how do we sew seam allowance. Because as you can see, some of you who have a little bit of experience with commercial patterns, pretty much consistently commercial patterns call for 5/8 of an inch seam allowance. That's what they call for. Let's see. Then the following week is July 2nd. We will do understanding and executing seam finishes. So what is a seam finish? A seam finish is how you finish the raw edge of your seam allowance once your garment is made or while you're making your garment. Because you don't want to have raw edges on the inside. You don't want someone to open up your bag and see the raw edges of your fabric. You want them to be finished. So we will go over the seam finish. And what you'll notice is each week we're taking a different skill. And each of those skills is going to add up to skills that you're going to use to make your bag. So that's how this is set up. So each week when you learn a skill, that skill is segues into when you make your bag. So when you get to making the bag, it's like, oh, this is seam allowance. This is what I just learned. Or, oh, this is a seam finish. This is what I just learned. So that's the way I set up the classes for those of us with learning differences. I teach you the skill first outside of the actual garment or product. And then once you get to the garment or product, you've already done that specific skill that you now need to use to make the garment or product. Because I feel like a lot of times we go into making a garment and someone doesn't even know how to understand how to sew straight, or someone doesn't understand what seam allowance is. We dial it back a little bit to go forward, so to speak. So each week we'll learn a skill that you will eventually apply to making your actual bag. July 9th, which will be our class after our class for week 5, will be understanding your PDF sewing patterns. Okay, so we talked a little bit about that. And that's where our bag pattern will come from. That's the pattern that we're going to use to make the bag is going to be a PDF sewing pattern. I'm going to go through the process of showing you how to find it, purchase it, print it out, and put it together, because that's super important. So we need to take each step. Find it, purchase it, print it out, put it together. That's what we want to do with our PDF patterns. Because even though PDF patterns are becoming more, I guess, relevant in what people use, because of things like Joanne's closing and you can't go in and look at the pattern. You have to master how to use a PDF pattern. You have to know how to do that. It's not complicated, but it's something that you should see first before you actually do it. So we'll have that on week 5. That's July 9th. And then, as you can see for each week, those of you who have the syllabus, and I will drop the syllabus again in the description so that you have it. Each week in the description, I will have the full and complete line of the syllabus for that week. So you'll be able to, even if you can't find your syllabus, you'll go back to the description for the class, for the live, and you'll see in that description everything that you need to understand for that week. That's super important. Let's see. Week 6 is July 16th, and we will be looking at mastering laying out, pinning, and cutting your sewing pattern. Why is that important? Why do we need to specifically look at that? Because in garment making, in product making, your cutting and pressing and sewing are super important, especially your cutting. We'll talk a little bit about how do I cut on grain? What does that mean? What's off grain mean? All of those different things. I want you guys to have step by step instructions on how to do this. I don't want to skip steps. I don't want to skip over things that are super important to you. And I believe that the skills that I'm teaching you are skills that you're going to be able to take into whatever you decide you're going to make. It's not just skills that you're going to learn for this specific project. It's skills that you're actually going to learn to use for if you decide to make a garment or if you decide to make another product. That's super important. So the skills that you will learn in this class, of course, geared towards professional industry standards, are skills that you will take that you could use in any other product making or garment making. Week 7, which is on July 30th, will be how to use double-sided interfacing, executing a bias-bound seam finish, and that, of course, will be geared towards the product. So what I would say is this. By week 5, we're jumping right into making the product. So the first 4 weeks of class, or the first, this week, of course, going over the overview of everything we're going to be doing. Then the following two or 3 weeks, we'll be basically creating the samples that we'll need to understand how we're going to actually create the bag. And then by week 5, we're starting on creating the bag. We're like going right into making the bag, cutting out our patterns, getting our patterns together. By week 6, we are laying out, pinning, and cutting our pattern. By week 7, of course, I just spoke of. By week 7, we're going to know how to use double-sided interfacing and executing a bias-bound seam finish on the actual product. Okay, so this is not a sample. So by week 5, we're already making our bag, and we're already doing a skill for the bag each week. So each week you will do something to take the bag to the next step. So each week you'll have a task, and I'll once again fully demonstrate it in class. You will see my hands physically sewing. You will see me cutting. You will see me measuring, because it's super important for those of us with learning differences that we see that it's taught to us visually. I can tell you how something is done, but if I show it to you, you probably will understand it better. So with having a basic sewing class, it's super important that I physically show you each week what you're supposed to be doing. It just makes things easier. By week 8, we're doing our darts and our facing, okay, in our bag, of course. And we're executing our shoulder bag by that time. Understanding and executing your zipper application, your bag is going to have a zipper. So each step, once again, each week. And then the great part about the PDF pattern is the PDF pattern also gives you steps on how to put it together. I use some of those steps, but I also modify those steps to make them more, simplify them and make them easier to understand. So it's super important that I break things down so that you understand them. So when we do print out the PDF pattern, it does have its own sewing instructions. I do use them, but I modify them to take them up a step as far as like being based upon industry standards. So you'll see some things that the PDF sewing pattern instructions will give you. I'll take those and I'll modify them. simplify some of them, but some of the instructions were not to my liking as far as like being based upon industry standards, so I took them up a notch. So let's see. By week 8, we'll be executing our zipper in the bag. By week 9, is the zipper, and then week 10 is understanding how to execute your final seams and finishes on the shoulder bag. By week 10, you're gonna have a bag. You're actually gonna have a physical bag. So I would say, when I think about it, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 6 weeks. Within that 6 weeks, after we start the class today, the first 3 weeks, we're making sample, we're getting you warmed up, understanding your machine, of course. We talked about that today. And then, of course, getting down the basics. And then by week 5, we're already starting to make our bag. So 7 weeks, you'll have a product to take away from this class. And it's super important that you start with accessories as a basic sewing class, because I feel like jumping right into a garment sometimes can be intimidating, and it doesn't always end the way you want it to end as far as like having something that you can physically wear. The way I like to think about it, being taught from industry standards and teaching you based upon industry standards, is when I turn your product inside out, or when I turn your garment inside out, the inside of the garment or product should look equally as good as the outside. I shouldn't be like, okay, don't look on the inside because this is all messy. No, that's not what we're doing here. Everything is going to be based upon industry standards. We're going to take our time, and we're going to do things in a way where you have something that you're going to be proud of by week 10. So week 10, of course, will be August 20th. And if there's any changes as far as like when the classes will run, I will absolutely let you all know way ahead of time. It won't be like, oh, we're not having class today. No, it's not going to be like that. I will know. So let's talk a little bit about what you'll need for next week, your supplies for next week. That's so important that we talk about that. Okay. Let me just see. I'm going to slow down a little bit, see if I have any questions. Let's see. All right, I don't see anything yet. Okay, so, and then each week I kind of get an overview of like where everybody's from, that type of thing. But I don't want to waste a lot of time chit-chatting. I really want you all to get what you came for as far as like the class. Super important for me to be able to do that. And I don't want to waste your time, and I want to make sure that you're getting what you signed up for, basically, but just like I said. Let's see. So let's talk a little bit about your supplies. Okay. So as far as resources for supplies, once again, we all know Joann's closed. Resources for supplies that I use, that I prefer, and I'm going to show you on my computer. I'm going to bring this up. Okay. Those of you who are not, Amazon people, I get it. I understand it. Your best resource, I would say, if you want something right away, quick, unfortunately, Amazon is it. You pretty much, any supply that I give you, Amazon is going to have. Okay, let's take Amazon out of the way. So outside of Amazon, I like to use, some people say WAWAK. It's WAWAK. They are a really, really good supply place for your supplies for basic sewing. Okay. They have everything as far as like your notions, everything you'll need as far as thread, needles, zippers, anything and everything. They deliver, they do overnight. They're a really, really good resource for your sewing supplies, right? I would say, as far as fabric goes, once again, Amazon is a good resource. I do like to go to movefabric.com. Some of you guys are familiar with that as far as like, you maybe have seen it. Those of you who watch Project Runway, maybe you've seen it on Project Runway, movefabric.com. They also have fabrics as well. They're a little bit more pricey. So I would say it depends on what your price point is. Amazon is good for less expensive to moderate price fabrics. And then of course, Mood is a little bit more expensive and there's a little bit more of a variety of luxury fabrics. But I would say moodfabric.com is really a really cool resources. And for those of you who maybe live in New York or LA, and I don't know what their other location is, you could always go in store. Like when I'm in New York, I always go to Mood. Mood actually opened when I was in design school years ago. It is a good resource for fabric, but if you want to get something more affordable, depending on what you're doing, you absolutely can use another resource. Fabric.com used to be another resource I used, but unfortunately, they were bought by Amazon. So fabric.com on Amazon, of course, is a resource for you. There used to be this Charlie Girl Fabrics that I used to get fabric from. They also went out of business. So it's your resources for fabrics are not limited, but they're not as readily available as they used to be. So you'll be able to go to Joann's. Those of you who live in Philly, you could always go to Fabric Row. Those of you who live in New York, you could always go to the Fabric District. Those of you who live in LA, I'm sure there's a fabric district. Those of you who live in Africa, there's a fabric district. There's fabric everywhere. Europe, same thing. So depending on where you are, your resource is going to be different. But for those of us who prefer to have something online and you can't get to the store, those are the resources that I use. So Amazon is one resource. Movefabric.com is one resource. Fabric.com is a resource, but like I said, they were bought out by Amazon, so you would need to go to Amazon to access them. Let's see. So as far as supplies that you will need for next week, I want to go over those. And then of course, if you have questions about the machine that's going to be required for the class, if you already have a machine that you're familiar with, that you know how to use, I'm for it. But I think a lot of times with my beginners, they don't know where to start as far as like purchasing a machine. They see something, you know, with the digital and all of that, and that's great. But sometimes for those of us with learning differences, those machines are harder. I feel like the more bells and whistles my machine has, the more stuff there is for me to figure out. So as a beginner sewer, I would recommend a more simplified machine. Singer is always the one I recommend because it's readily used in design schools all over the world. And I feel like they are a simpler brand for a beginner sewer to understand. I can't emphasize that enough. And once again, if you need, you know, insight on why Singer is or insight on other machines, I have that video up. I will put the link for that video that is on the Royal Fulani Living Soul School channel. I will put that link in the description so that way you can see and you can kind of like hear my professional opinion about why Singer is the best machine. In my professional opinion, Singer is the best machine for a beginner sewer. Super important for next week, let's review your supplies. And I physically have them here because I want you to be able to see. Okay, so next week's class, what are we doing? Next week, we are mastering your sewing machine, understanding your machine, seam guide, and executing a plain seam. Okay, so once again, what you will see is you will see my physical hands and the machine, and you will see exactly what I'm referring to. I'm not going to tell you something and not visually show it to you, especially for those of us with learning differences. I need to visually see what someone is saying, and that's just me. Other learning differences, other individuals with learning differences, that may not be the case, but for me, I need to visually see something in order to understand it and grasp it. And that's super important for those of us with learning differences that are visual learners. So for next week, what supplies will you need for you to understand your sewing machine? Of course, you need a sewing machine. So it's important that you have a sewing machine. If you already have a sewing machine, great, wonderful, that'll work. If you already mastered and you know how to use it, great, wonderful, that will work. If you don't have a sewing machine and you need recommendations, once again, the video's there. And of course, again, I'll show you Singer 4411 heavy duty series. There she is. This is the machine that I highly recommend for my beginner sewers. Super important that you have a machine that you feel comfortable with and that doesn't overwhelm you as far as like with a bunch of bells and whistles. The digital stuff, I try to steer my beginner sewers away from that because that sometimes becomes overwhelming. But eventually, once you upgrade your machine, go for it. Go for the digital stuff. I absolutely, am for it. So, of course, you will need a machine. You will also need a clear empty bobbin. Okay. So each machine takes a different bobbin. Okay. For the Singer machine, the one that I'm using, this is, find the camera. This is the bobbin that I'm referring to. So you will need a clear, empty bobbin. Or if your machine does not take this, your machine may take a metal bobbin, whatever. If you already have a machine and your machine takes another bobbin, just make sure the bobbin is empty. Okay, because we want to go over how to wind an empty bobbin. That's something that kind of gets a little confusing sometimes too, because if you don't wind your bobbin correctly, your machine starts to like malfunction because your bobbin may be too loose, or it may not be wound evenly. So we want to make sure that your bobbin, you understand how your bobbin works, and I will demonstrate on the Singer Heavy Duty 4411 how that is done. And I'm trying to think if it's 4411, 4423. I'm going to double check and drop it in the description, but it's one of those two machines. So you will need an empty bobbin. If you already have a machine and your bobbin is not clear, that's fine. But I don't want you to think your bobbins are interchangeable, because I think that's a mistake too. So another reason why I recommend the Singer Heavy Duty series is because it has the drop bobbin. It's a drop bobbin mechanism. So there is no bobbin case. Like some of you had machines where you have a case and your bobbin goes into the case. I feel like with beginners, if you're just starting, if you lose the case, you gotta wait and order another one or find another one, and you can't use your machine. So I feel like with beginners, get something that's as simplified as possible. The drop bobbin, you lose this bobbin, you go find another bobbin in your kit and you start. So it's equally important for you to have something that's simple. I prefer a machine, whether it's a Singer or you already have it, that has a drop bobbin mechanism. That means I take the bobbin, wind it, drop it into the machine. I don't need the case in order for the bobbin to function properly. Okay, so got my bobbin. I'm using the clear. Just make sure your bobbin is empty for next week. The other thing that you'll need is, of course, thread. I would say all-purpose cotton poly thread. Don't get silk. Don't get the top stitch thread. Get an all-purpose cotton poly thread. It's super important. Brands, I usually do Coats and Clark or Gutermann. Those are my two brands that I swear by. Like I've been using those for like almost 3 decades. So Coats and Clark or Gutermann is fine. Once again, we all know Joann's went out of business, where we could go in, see a variety of threads. If you put in all-purpose sewing thread, tons of resources will pop up. Thank God for Google. So it's super important that you get the right thread though. So you want to get an all-purpose cotton or poly thread. So that looks like that. Okay. And make sure, another thing is, get a cylindrical spool. So the reason why I recommend the cylindrical spool is because you notice, like when the older spools, like they have the little top and it kind of has the notch that's there. A lot of times those can create like issues when the thread's going through the spool and it catches on the notch, or, so I always recommend a cylindrical spool. What that means is that this is just completely flush. The top doesn't stick out, that doesn't stick out. It's just completely flush. It's like the same cylindrical going all the way up and all the way down. So I highly recommend getting a cylindrical spool, whether it's Gutermann, whether it's Coats and Clark. Those are the two brands that I use. Those are what I recommend. Fabric scissors. Okay. Now, here's the thing. What I always say is you should have 2 pairs of scissors. One for cutting paper, one for cutting fabric. And so I'll grab my paper scissors. Okay. These two things are not interchangeable. Fabric scissors are for cutting fabric. Paper scissors are for cutting paper. Why? Because Your fabric scissors need to stay sharp at all times to cut your fabric. If you start cutting paper, it starts to dull them. Can you sharpen them? Of course you can. But at the same time, why even go through all of that? So you need two pairs of scissors. You need paper scissors and patterns and fabric scissors. These are for cutting all kinds of paper. Your pattern, any form of paper. These, of course, are exclusively for cutting your fabric. That's what they're for. They're exclusively for cutting fabric. Don't let your family use these. Hide them. I can't tell you how many incidents I've had where my family has used my fabric scissors for, my daughter may use them for cutting craft paper or something like that. I'm like, oh God. So I had to go and get another pair. But keep these hidden. Your fabric scissors are strictly for fabric. And I also, like, sometimes what people will do is they'll buy two. These are Fiskars. It's a brand that is pretty inexpensive. They're probably like the best beginner fabric scissors that I know of. Fiskars are pretty cheap. They also, if you're right-handed, get right-hand scissors. If you're left-handed, get left-hand scissors. They do exist. So don't think you have to be frustrated by, getting right-handed. Get right-handed if you're right-handed, left-handed if you're left-handed. But you must have a pair of fabric scissors that you only use for cutting fabric. Paper scissors only used for cutting paper. Okay. Let's see. Okay, for next week, because we're practicing sewing straight, basic piece of copy paper. Okay, basic piece of copy paper. Grab copy paper from your printer. Grab, piece of paper from, buy a ream of paper. Grab a piece. You're gonna need this for next week as well. Okay. You will need muslin. Okay, what is muslin, right? So we've heard this term before. Muslin is an inexpensive, basic fabric, specifically in this case, cotton, for you to make prototypes or samples out of. Okay. Now you may hear the word muslin, which is the actual fabric. Okay. Which is this cotton fabric, comes in white, comes bleached and unbleached, looks like this. Okay. Or you may hear the term a muslin. Okay. They're different. A muslin is I'm making a sample, a prototype of a garment that I'm designing, and I need to get the fit right. I need to make sure the fabric's right. So I'm making a muslin out of whatever fabric is comparable to my final fabric. So whatever my finished fabric is, I'm making a muslin, a sample for fitting purposes, for fabric purposes. Something needs to be changed. I want to be able to understand that through making a muslin. Okay. So, but this is muslin fabric, okay? It comes bleached and unbleached, 100% cotton. So you'll need that for next week as well. Let's see. A pencil, of course. You can have number 2. I prefer mechanical. It just makes it easier. I don't have to keep sharpening it. Number 2, or a mechanical pencil. Seam ripper. This is going to be your best friend. Okay, you're going to be inseparable. Okay, seam ripper is basically when you make a mistake in stitching, you just pick it out and you redo it. Okay, sometimes you'll make a stitch. Part of the stitch will be correct and the other part won't. Only thing you'll need to do is seam rip out the part that's not correct, right? And then you start at the part where you are correct and then you finish it out. So seam ripper is going to be your best bud. The next 10 weeks looks like that. Okay. And then, of course, cylindrical spool, right? See-through ruler looks like this. Okay, here's where things get a little confusing. There are several rulers that look similar, but the measurements are different. I need your see-through ruler to be in inches. You'll see rulers that are in pica. Don't ask me what that is. I think it's an architecture ruler. I got it one time. I was so confused. No, your see-through ruler needs to be in inches. This is, I want to say, Westcott. And once again, these supplies are available to you on Amazon. Waywack has them as well. Showed you guys the website. I will drop those websites in the description so that way you know where you can purchase your supplies. So see-through ruler, okay. And then, okay, guys, a good iron. Sounds weird. You absolutely need a good iron for making garments and making products. I think this is the mistake that a lot of beginner sewers make is, well, I'll just put the seam together. No, you're going to do a lot of sewing and pressing, sewing and pressing. I would say the mark of a good product and something that allows your product to look more professionally executed is accurate sewing and accurate pressing. So it's important that you have a good iron that gives you some good steam. Make sure your surface is clean. I have a tendency to clean this sometimes with the iron cleaner. But yeah, so can you use the iron that you already have? Absolutely. If you have an iron already, use it. I try to eventually, when you go a little bit further in, try to have an iron that you exclusively use for your projects. That way, if somebody makes grilled cheese with it, you don't have any issues. And it's like it all depends on what your lifestyle is like. But you definitely want to have, and sometimes they have like the mini irons. You could get that as well, as long as it makes steam. Okay. Um, those are the supplies that you'll need for this week, and that is in today's description for week 1. So you will need those supplies for the next class. Next class will be June 11th. Okay, so don't think we're having class next week. Next class will be June 11th. My daughter's graduating, so theater graduation is a whole week of stuff. So June 11th is our next class. If you have questions, email me. I will drop the email once again in the description. You can email me questions about anything I talked about today. If you still don't understand, like, what machine am I supposed to get me in? Like, which one is which? Once again, in today's syllabus, I have put, and in the description, there is a link for the video that basically breaks down what's the best sewing machine for a beginner sewer. Okay, super important. I think that's it for today. So once again, Panthers, welcome to HillmanTok University. I am your instructor, Mina Diaz-Stevens. We will be here the scheduled times according to the syllabus for professional sewing for beginners with learning differences, bag making 101. I will see you all June 11th. Take care. Bye.